Duncan Minty is an expert in insurance ethics. Duncan, thank you so much for joining us today on the Fraud Leadership Series.
You're welcome. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
When we talk about ethical issues in insurance, obviously we could talk about this for hours, if not days. But when it comes to public support, why is this such an important topic?
I think because the public see tackling fraud in any context as a good thing to do, and it will give its support to that. And I think that they recognise that it's good for them to have fraud tackled, identified, and they want to also see this as something that's done visibly enough and strongly enough to put off all those who maybe not intending to be fraudulent, but who may drift into it by accident. So there's a lot of public support for it because they recognise that everyone can benefit from it in some way.
Yeah, we're all about honest insurance. That's obviously where the whole concept of insurance starts, right? It's important for the public benefit, but there's sort of an ethical way about going about tackling insurance fraud. We all want to tackle insurance fraud, but talk to me about the ethics of doing so.
Yeah, because certainly there's two pillars to insurance fraud. There's that it is certainly a very ethical thing to do in itself, but also the way in which insurers go about tackling insurance fraud is itself an ethical aspect that always needs to be taken into account. So when firms are pushing forward on insurance fraud programs, which is great, they also need to push forward on how they're doing that within commonly accepted ethical standards. And I think once the public sees those standards being used, then they'll give it their support. And one of the features of that support is that once they have confidence in a firm doing those two things, then they will be more confident buying from that firm. And the firm itself will be more confident selling to that customer. So this creates a sort of virtuous circle in which both support each other. And I think one of the things which the sector should aspire to is that once that virtuous circle starts going, then the dialogue, the tone of conversation around insurance and fraud changes, so that it's quite common for people within work situations, for example, to hear something which is rather unethical, but they just walk on by because it's just too complicated to deal with. And what we should encourage them to do is to tackle that, to respond to it. And so looking at insurance fraud and, say, for example, discussions amongst work colleagues or in the family where someone's saying, well, how about adding a few more things into the claim or tweaking the quote in that way, then rather than the person just saying, well, that's not very good, but I won't answer that person, that encourages people to say, hey, that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be doing that. It's not the right thing. And so I think once the sector has the relationship with customers around insurance fraud that can deliver that, then we will enter into a new phase of how insurance fraud is being tackled. We have gone through big steps in the last 5 to 8 years, and there's been tremendous progress made. But I think that the next phase is really going to have people joining with the insurance community to see insurance fraud as a bad thing that should be tackled, should be challenged. But in doing that, they need to have the confidence that, if you're an honest customer, you will have your honest claim paid, that dishonest customers will be tackled. No one wants to see colleagues or friends or family who they know are honest being accused of being dishonest. They want to have confidence that fairness and openness is being respected and that the outcomes being delivered are ones which, if they decided to investigate them and understand them more, they could say, yeah, I'm happy with that. And I think that's probably the next big phase, is that to take the tremendous steps forward and just to link hands with the public and bring them with you at the same time. Because if the public isn't with you, then you're always at risk of having certain practices questioned, perhaps a regulator saying, no, you've got to push back on that. Because what we're seeing occasionally is the regulator looking into areas where they're saying, no, this is not what we expected. We think of things but rather differently, and we expect you to have to adapt to that. So I think that the onwards progress is always better when you're doing it in harmony with your main constituent, which is the customers.
That's absolutely the goal, and man, I see that as being really difficult too, right? Because
Mm.
unfortunately, insurance companies usually only have one or two chances to interact with their customers. Once when they buy the policy, and the second time if they're unlucky enough to have a claim. So it's going to be interesting to see how they tackle this. But I absolutely love your enthusiasm, and trust me, I'm right there with you. I think this is possible, and I think this is the direction we should be heading. So I really appreciate the insights. Thanks, Duncan.
You're welcome.